This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.
Now, on Talk Radio 1210, WPHT, WPHT, HD, WOGL, HD3, Philadelphia. Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
If we don't move in our own direction, we're going to become extinct. In fact, in some cases, we're close to being extinct right now.
Presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries, and powered by the law offices of Pond, Lehocky, Stern, Giordano. Talk, listen, and speak to the region's most influential leaders. It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries. A good Saturday evening, everybody, and welcome into the big show. And we welcome everyone tuning into the big show. We've got a great lineup for you tonight and a great show. But before we do, and before we begin, as we always do, J-Doc, on a Saturday night, we set our table. So I'm looking for my drum roll. Do we have it? Can't set the table without the drum roll, Glenny. Come on, brother.
Almost got it.
It almost put you a minute behind, J-Doc, but you got here in time.
Well, I'll tell you what. So tonight's meal was from Couch Tomato in Manayunk on Main Street.
Nice.
We got some unbelievable pizza, fantastic, and I want to say crunchy. Flavor was amazing. As you can see, it's all over my face. Offer Mrs. Agre and Lou Agre here in the studio a piece, but they're going out to dinner afterwards. But I'm telling you, you're missing out. And also want to give a shout out to Christina Rose, the operations manager there, who took care of me. And I can tell you this, we were running late. They took care of the pizza. We got a couple salads. So thanks to Couch Tomato in Roxborough, pepperoni pizza, unbelievable.
And the pizza from Couch Tomato has knocked you off of the juice diet.
Yeah, I mean, she told me, Christina Rose told me you can juice pizza. So we'll be working on that later.
It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor in the studio with us for perhaps, I believe, the entire hour. We'll welcome in Lou Agre. Lou is the president of the Philadelphia Metal Trades Council. He also is the business agent, organizer, and lawyer for the Operating Engineers Local 542, and we welcome Lou into the studio. Lou, thanks for being here.
Just
welcome
glad
you.
To be here. People say I have a good face for radio.
Yeah, join the crowd, brother. Join the crowd.
Why do you think we're here?
Yeah, so good stuff. So Lou will be along with us, and he'll be part of the conversation as well. You heard from the open when we started the show, Dom Giordano, earlier this afternoon, on Facebook, posting out, hearing from two sources that the Rizzo statue could come down tonight. Joining us now on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor's Frank Rizzo Jr. joining us here on Saturday Night Live. J-Doc, let me give you an opportunity to set the table. You heard the Facebook quote or the reference by Dom earlier today. It's been all over. Yeah, There's a lot of conversation. Take a moment, relax, take a deep breath, and set the table until we can get everything worked out.
So we're going to have on former Republican City Councilman at large, was for 16 years, Frank Rizzo Jr. We're going to talk about at the end, what's going on here in Philadelphia, which was sparked from what went on in Charlottesville, of course, and very difficult times. I can tell you that certainly we're letting statues, in my opinion, divide us as Americans and as Philadelphians. And I wrote I had a little post on Facebook myself, and I because all this statue stuff is really, really eating me up. And so I said, if you identify with what a statue stands for, then admire it. If you oppose what a statue stands for, then let it serve as a reminder of a part of history you choose not to repeat. Let's not let statues define us as people or divide us as Americans. And, I could tell you this, the Confederate flag and all those things that are going on down south, there have been conversations about them for ages, okay? That wasn't...
I'm here.
Okay, so we have Frank on it, but I just want to say something. But those conversations and those vetted, they've been in the legislatures for years, and they did it. what's going on here in Philadelphia is a knee-jerk reaction to what happened down south. So I'm happy to bring onto the line Frank Rizzo Jr. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Frank, you hear what's going on. Certainly, stemming from what happened down south. Tell us your thoughts right now.
Well, I think you said exactly it. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It has nothing to do with the Confederate generals that have monuments throughout the United States of America. Frank Rizzo became mayor after being police commissioner. A huge majority of African Americans voted for him. This is a bunch of agitators and people that don't know Frank Rizzo. They weren't even born when Frank Rizzo served the city of Philadelphia, that he loved more than anything other than his family, died trying to come back mayor of Philadelphia, integrated the Philadelphia Police Department when he was first commissioner. Police officers used to work 2 blacks, 2 whites to a car. He didn't like that. He wanted a black and a white officer working together. He put his life on the line for every race in the city of Philadelphia and visitors to the city. He wasn't for bad guys. He wasn't for someone that would hit an old lady over the head with a pipe. They were criminals to him, and he didn't care what color they were.
Frank Rizzo Jr. joining us here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor along with J-Doc in the studio. Lou Agre is our special guest in the studio. He'll be with us. Frank, when you see, when you look and you hear and you listen to the noise that's out around the Delaware Valley, and then you see the defacing of the statue, you react how?
Well, overnight they now deface the beautiful mural that was really, really well done down at 9th and Montrose in South Philadelphia. Makes so many people happy. I kid my friends sometimes when I'm out, and I'll say, when we're in Center City and I pass my dad's statue, I said, I'm wondering who's having more action this today, the Rocky statue or the Rizzo statue.
Right.
He's part of Philadelphia, and like so many people have said, we can't change history. He was the police chief. He started as a cop on the beat. He did his job, did it well, had one of the finest police departments in the United States of America, protected all Philadelphians. And again, I repeat, became the mayor of Philadelphia right after serving as a police officer and police commissioner in one of the largest majority elections ever. If he were a racist, he would never have gotten elected the first time. Unfortunately, there are people out there that don't know this man. The people during his time as police commissioner and mayor, his security detail, when they were weighing in at scenes of turbulence and turmoil, African-American police officers, Tony Fullwood, Eddie Harrell, Jimmy Turner, ate at our at our dinner table every night after they got in at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. My mom's 101 years old, and she said she just can't believe what's going on. So all I can say is, Frank Rizzo, my father, I never saw him be disrespectful in his life to any race. Bad guys, if they happen to be black, if they happen to be white, yeah, he didn't particularly like them or care for them.
Frank, we talked a little bit earlier today, and we talked about some of the difficult situations that your father encountered, and you talked about, and I talked about that iconic photo with the nightstick, and you would actually explain that to me, because sometimes some of these images, that you can find them online, and certainly they were part of the media. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, you're talking about the picture that was snapped at him with a nightstick when he was in a tuxedo. Mm-hmm. And that is a funny story, and I'll tell you another funny story. And Thatcher Longstreth and myself used to laugh about this, but he was at a formal event at the Bellevue Stratford with my mom. A phone call came in. One of the security people from the hotel came over and said, "Commissioner, could you come to the phone?" Or Deputy Commissioner, whatever it was. And he went to the phone, and there was a disturbance. I believe it was in Grace Ferry, and remember that he left the event in the tuxedo. He wasn't the kind of guy that would go home and get changed. When there was a need for a top commander, that being him, he went in the middle of the night to fires. Broke his hip at the refinery fire. He was where the action was, and he needed to be there because he was the one that motivated, kept the commanders going forward, kept the police officers that may have worked hard, long hours. So they got down to Gray's Ferry, and back then, we don't tell a lot of people this part of the story, but he smoked cigarettes. And he was lighting up a cigarette, and it was a little bit windy, and he couldn't get it lit. So he put the nightstick that he had in his hand in his cummerbund, so he'd have two hands, one to cup the lighter or the match and to light up. And one of the photographers spotted that cummerbund scene, the nightstick in the cummerbund, put that in the paper, and the next was history. And it's funny, they thought that was going to be a negative photo. And Thatcher Longstreth had not millions, but thousands of these pictures of that cummerbund blown up, and they put them on poles all over the city of Philadelphia. Right. The funny part is they came to my dad would come to an event in the neighborhood. The kids and the people would be ripping them all off, and the opposition thought they were being negative and wanting them to be autographed. So, that's the story about the nightstick and the cummerbund.
But you also talked about in Gray's Ferry. There was, because I had asked you, and I'd said, we talked about the stereotypes, and we talked about the African American community and a lot of the images that are being talked about today. And you had said to me about that incident in Gray's Ferry, or at least another when he had to intervene in a race riot. He tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, when he went to, I believe again, and if someone out there will correct me if I'm wrong, there was an incident where blacks and whites were getting together and having some a racial issue in the neighborhood. He went down there, he separated them, and he told the whites, "You're going to behave. You're not going to do anything wrong. You're not going to try to hurt anybody." And he told the blacks the same thing, same story, equal treatment. They had an expression about Frank Rizzo. He was firm but fair, and there was a perfect example of firm and fairness. The white guys behave, don't do anything, or you'll be dealt with. The blacks got the same sermon.
Frank Rizzo Jr. joining us here on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Frank, if your father were alive today, how would he react to what's happening in the world?
He would. I don't think he would believe what is going on. I think that things like Virginia and the marches in Boston and all the disorder throughout the world, what occurred in Spain and other parts of the world, it's just to the point where it's hard to believe. And I know that if he were the mayor of a big city, there would be no sanctuary city. If you break law, if you break federal law, there would be an appropriate way to work with the federal government. I mean, can you imagine a person breaks the law and the police won't notify the feds that they have in custody a person that was arrested for a crime? So it just that would have never happened in Philadelphia. But times have changed, and personalities have changed, and opinions have changed. So there's things going on in the world that we don't necessarily agree with, but have no control over it.
We'll take your calls throughout the show at 855-839-1210. Lou Agre, who is the president of the Philadelphia Metal Trades Council, is our guest in studio tonight. Lou wants to weigh in. Lou.
Hey, Lou. How you doing, Councilman? Good, nice talking to you again. As a matter of fact, your father and probably you used to live right behind me on when you used to live on Mount Pleasant Avenue before you moved to Provident Road. My bedroom looked down to your house.
Oh my God!
Growing up, yeah, but
that's where all the stories are. And all the stories are in that sideline.
Safe neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm gonna weigh in. And look, I admire your father, even though he, we had our run-ins at points,
Sure.
at demonstrations or whatever. And nobody was more pro-labor. I will tell you, I talked to a friend of mine from AFSCME yesterday, and he is 100% for keeping that statue up. But it was a nuanced guy. He was a very, very complicated guy, and he has set the plate for everything that happened in Philadelphia. Whether it's Wilson Good or Ed Rendell or John Street, the image of Frank Rizzo hangs over this whole city for good and for bad. And I'll tell you, I do not think they should take the statue down until everybody in the city has a job, every neighborhood is safe, everybody can get drug treatment, and every kid gets a good education. When that happens, then we can deal with statues.
Absolutely.
Well, and I would say this, your dad, and I would say in his later years particularly, but he was the type of individual that didn't have a filter sometimes. And, I know I had a father just like that. And he spoke his mind and wasn't somebody who was politically correct. And sometimes when you see the old, what was that one who was dealing with the newspaper, the news media guy? I forget what.
Stan Borman. Well, Stan Borman got exactly what he deserved.
Right.
My father said to him, "Look, I'm a private citizen now. Leave me alone. I'm out walking my dog. Stop tracking me down."
Right.
He didn't get the message, and then my dad, like you say, unfiltered, unloaded on him.
Right. And I forget what he called him, but I could say
he called him a lush, and he was.
Right. And at the end of the day, do you think so? In other words, when they're not trying to make someone look good, they stereotype them with stuff like that. But at least with Frank Rizzo, when you knew where you stood. And at the end of the day, you think those type of images they're trying to use against them?
Oh, absolutely. And the guys in labor will know that people would go into his office, and a lot of guys would say, "Hey, we better get that in writing." They knew when they walked out of there they had a deal. There was no 10 minutes later a phone call. Oh, I didn't mean what I said. My dad went and got. When they built the commuter tunnel, the labor unions in this town were not working. And my father went to a Republican president, President Nixon, and got the money to do the commuter tunnel in the city of Philadelphia that put a lot of people to work. And he was not going to not have that happen. So, again, they try to stereotype. They try to paint images of my dad not being an articulate, smart guy. Let me tell you, I've talked to a lot of people that dealt with him, professors and PhDs and people with doctorates. They said he could sit down in a room and understand an issue in 10 minutes where they were still trying to figure it out.
The interesting thing when you talk about it, I think about it. What would you say to people? Our listeners out there. Listen. I want to say this. I'm sensitive. I have so many friends in the African American community, and I'm sensitive to, what people have gone through, and I'm sensitive to history, and at the same time, I'm sensitive to the needs in our communities. What would you say to people today? You grew up in the same house as Frank Rizzo. What would you say to people listening that they might not know about your father? Maybe something he taught you growing up.
Well, he was one of the kindest guys and wanted to help people. Let me tell you about my beginnings out of high school. Never went to college. I became a lineman for the Philadelphia Electric Company. And a lot of people will be surprised to hear this. The gentleman that I loved and I worked for the best part of my career as a lineman for almost 8 years before I moved on to other things, was an African-American foreman who treated me like a son, and my family treated him like he was part of the family. Christmases, you name it. John was my buddy, taught me well. I took a lot of heat from some of the white guys that I worked with at PICO at the time, in a nice way, not a mean way, that I was working for an African-American foreman. And I talked to my dad about that one day, and he told me, "Son, don't let anybody ever upset you. John's a great man. You learned a lot from him, and he's a good person." And that was the kind of thing. He could have picked up the phone and probably made a phone call and got me moved over to a white foreman. And I stayed with my with John Francis for the best part of my career in the line crews. So that's the kind of guy he was. He like I said, the guys that were around him Jimmy Turner, Tony Fullwood,
Sure.
Eddie Harrell, all the black police officers that were his security detail. My mom would have a dinner ready for 8 people
Sure.
at night when they came home. Hey, come on now. At 8 o'clock at night, there weren't too many places where you could get a good meal, and they were like part of our family. And still today, I'm still in touch with some of them that are still alive. Unfortunately, Tony Fullwood, Big Tony that worked for Lynn Abraham, he's deceased now, and some of the others are gone. But they loved him, and he loved them.
So, Frank, we're going to bring Dan Loney into the discussion.
Hey, Frank, I do the show right after these guys, but I am probably the only person at this station that can say that I worked here when your dad did the show on 1210 as a producer with Ruth Weisberg.
Right, Ruthie.
And I was just about to say, the greatest line I remember from working that show was, "Ruthie, let's go to the phones."
That's right. Yep.
And
Billy
I will.
Muggleson, do you see any police cars out there, Billy?
Well, I'm going to tell you one quick story. I was going to Temple University at the time, late 80s, and one day I had my car broken into at Temple, and I had to come into work at 12:10. And Frank saw me, and he knew I was mad. And he goes, "Danny, what's up?" I said, "Frank, I just had my car broken into at Temple. I had a bunch of my books stolen. I was in communications at Temple. I had a recorder, like about a $300 tape recorder stolen." And he goes, "Danny, where it was at Temple? I'm going to call the detectives and find out what's going on with it." And dang if he didn't call. And I found out, 2 or 3 hours later, an update on what was going on.
Well,
he was a nice man.
Can I tell you, when he told you he was going to do something, and everybody in the studio probably knows, and like I said a few minutes ago, when his word was his bond, especially when it came to organized labor. If he could fight like hell with you, but if he told you something, it was a done deal. No double talk.
Frank Rizzo Jr. joining us here on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, along with Lou Agre in the studio and J. Doc M. Krause. Joe, Tom, Jody, and Seamus all waiting to jump in on the phone lines. We'll get to you. We just have a minute or two left with Frank Rizzo Jr., who was so kind to come on to the big show tonight and join us. Frank, ending the segment or ending the process during this show, and we appreciate you being here. How do you end it? What's your message to all in the Delaware Valley? Because the divide, to me, I'm bothered by the divide, not the want or the desire to change, but the unwillingness to go out and create change.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, the folks that are causing this controversy never knew, don't know Frank Rizzo. And I'm hoping that the young people, especially, that are being drawn into this thing, will really try to understand and learn what Frank Rizzo was all about. It was about keeping Philadelphia safe. If unfortunately some African Americans at the time were involved in whatever was going on, he wanted everyone to be treated fairly. And I think at the end of the day, and hopefully the director of the mural art program, Jane Golden, said that maybe the mural should be taken down. That would be a sad situation if people would just buckle under that pressure to end a situation. You got to be fair here. You've got to be truthful. Frank Rizzo was not a racist. Ask the thousands and thousands and thousands of people. To end it, I'll tell you. Do I have 10 seconds to tell you a quick story?
Yes, sir. I'm
coming out of work one night, and there's a lady leaning on my dad's statue, and I thought she was sick. I walk over, and I said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And she said, turned to me, African-American lady, and she said, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm here just visiting my friend." And I said, "Your friend?" She said, "Yep. When I needed help, I went to the mayor's office and told the mayor I was having trouble with my son. He got him a job. And he turned out to be a good boy. And if that hadn't happened, he would have gotten himself in a lot of trouble." So, look, all I know is that my dad was a good guy and a fair guy, firm but fair, even with me and my sister raising us. But all I can tell you is that I believe that honest, intelligent people will prevail, and I think the mural will be cleaned up. The statue is already cleaned up, and I can tell you, you asked me what he would have thought. The only thing I know he would have been concerned about, if he would have saw the picture with the spray paint all over the statue, the first thing out of his mind, he would have said, Franny, did they get any on my shoes?
Frank
He was clean as a whistle when it came to his attire.
Frank Rizzo Jr. joining us here tonight on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Frank Rizzo, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Guys, and thanks for everybody participating.
We'll get to a commercial break here. Everybody on the line, hold on. We'll get to you. Lou Agre in the studio will also tell you why he's here. We'll give him the microphone, and he'll continue to weigh in as we roll on to the top of the hour. Back in a moment.
Radio.com. Radio.com.
I won't participate on behalf of ourselves here at Local 98 or the Philadelphia Building Trades in conversations that are purely dominated on social issues that don't affect our jobs.
Back here live on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Special thanks to Frank Rizzo Jr. along with J-Doc, Lou Agre in the studio as well. Ryan Boyer vacationing away this weekend and not able to join us in the studio. We're going to go rapid fire to the phones if we can. Joe, holding on for a long time. Joe, thanks very much for holding on. Welcome into Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. My name is Joe Mastronardo. I'm actually Frank Rizzo's grandson, and I was hoping to get on with my uncle there, but he knocked it out of the park. So, I mean, he was really terrific.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you calling in, Joe. Tell us how you feel at this time.
Well, let's talk first of all. This got started with Councilwoman Helen Gim, right? Well, right. I mean, if anyone cared to do some research, which a lot of people on the left don't seem to want to do, you would find that she was born in 1968 in Seattle, Washington, okay? Frank Rizzo was in office from 1972 to 1980, which means she would have been between the ages of 4 and 12 years old while he was in power in Philadelphia. Interestingly enough, again, if you research her, she grew up around Columbus, Ohio. So I don't know how this woman, who was between 4 and 12 years old when Frank Rizzo was the mayor, she wasn't even alive. He was police commissioner from 67 to 71, so she was 2-3 years old when he was the police commissioner. I don't know how this woman seems to try to be some sort of authority figure on Frank Rizzo. It doesn't seem to add up to me.
Joe, appreciate that. Lou, you want to weigh in? Joe, thanks very much for the call. We're going to move on just because we got a ton of calls that we want to get through. We appreciate you hanging on and weighing in on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
Well, I have to tell you, I know Helen Gim fairly well. I was very helpful in getting her elected as the ward leader in the 21st Ward. But, just because you weren't born doesn't mean you can't read a book, doesn't mean you can't watch a documentary. I mean, I know what happened in the Second World War. I wasn't born until 1954. I know who won the Civil War, and that was 100 years before or 90 years before I was born. I don't know if I agree with her. I agree that there's other issues we need to be facing first. But just because she's I have to tell you, though, on the other hand, Frank Rizzo was somebody you had experience personally. Right. He's a hard guy to learn from a book. I mean, he dominated this city for years after he wasn't the mayor.
No doubt.
Tom, welcome into Saturday Night Live on PhillyLabor from Langhorne. Tom, welcome in. How are you?
Tom
may not be. Is Tom ready for us? Tom isn't. Tom is not there. Let's try Joe. All right, so let's move away from that and let Glenn get organized on the calls. We got a full board. Lou, you're in the studio with us for the entire broadcast and for the entire hour. Let's use the opportunity to transition in about your op-ed that was spurred by what happened in Charlottesville, which created so much conversation, so much reaction. Some people say so much divide, and I want to give you an opportunity, and we tee you up with an opportunity and that's why we have you in the studio. Welcome in.
Well, thank you. I'd like to talk about the people that are attacking our country, the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, the alt-right. These are the enemies of labor. People don't know that right to work, which is the enemies of labor, they act like there's no rights and there's no work about it. This was established as a racist doctrine because they didn't want blacks and whites to work together joining together and organizing unions and fighting the management and fighting bosses in order to better their lives of both black and white workers. They were active in Birmingham, and the Klan was very active in Birmingham in the 50s and 60s when the steel workers were trying to organize the big steel plants in Birmingham. I remember when I was working as an organizer in the South, the Klan killed 4 members of my union in Greensboro, known as the Greensboro Massacre, including the president of the local. And these are the enemies of labor. Everybody, one of the things that when a fascist government takes over, the first thing they do is they outlaw free trade unions. That's what happened in Germany. It happened in China.
And that's what I found very interesting about your op-ed, because I saw it on Facebook, on social media, and certainly and you would really you put some insight into it on how those individuals were not only the obviously opponents of minorities or anybody that doesn't think like them, but also of labor, which I thought was just amazing, because I didn't have that history.
Well, it's also that the history of the labor movement in this country has been fighting for everybody. As we say, we don't see black, we don't see white, we only see green.
Right.
And that as my father used to always say, that the greatest anti-poverty program ever is a good paying job.
Sure.
And I would add a good paying union job, because if you're working and you're making money, you don't have time to hate. And people don't realize that before this country shipped all their jobs overseas, in industries like steel and rubber and auto, 1 out of every 4 union members in America was an African American. Before those jobs left, before the management decided they were going to race to the bottom and steal our wages and export our jobs, the city with the highest percentage of African American home ownership was
Philadelphia?
Detroit.
How about that?
Because it was good union jobs.
Right.
And that's what, it was what made the middle class, and it was what made America after the war.
And it's so difficult to watch Detroit now. To look at all the homes that are vacant, and since industry left. But obviously, it's coming back a little bit more now. But certainly makes sense. Lou
Agre joining us in the studio. He'll be with us for the rest of the show. You can weigh in at 855-839-1210. Jody joining us on the phone here on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor. Jody, welcome into the big show. How are you?
How are you? I just wanted to mention I was Frank Rizzo's secretary.
Wow.
And this is killing me. This is killing. I live in South Philly, but it's killing South Philly, the River Wards. It's killing the Northeast. It's killing Roxborough. This man wasn't a racist. His phone even rang in my house. He never said, are they black, are they white, or Democrat, Republican, Polish, Irish, Italian. He helped everybody. Even when Wilson Good was mayor, when people weren't getting services, they called him and it got done. But I do want to mention there's thousands of people. As a matter of fact, we have a petition online. There's 23,000 signatures in favor of keeping a statue. And on Monday night, 4:15, after the eclipse, we're meeting on the northeast corner of City Hall, and then we're going to have a rally at the statue. So I hope our friends in labor, everybody could help out. I met Johnny Dock, actually, on Rizzo's campaign in '91, and he's been my dear friend since then. I come from a labor family, carpenters. My father worked at Westinghouse, so I know what it's all about. I know what you're talking about. Jobs leaving, and Frank Rizzo loved labor, and they loved him because he was a row house guy. I want to thank you for talking about this.
No, thank you, Jody, and thanks for holding on. We appreciate it. We're going to go rapid fire here, J-Doc, just to get everybody in. Seamus joining us on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor.
Hey.
Seamus, welcome in. How are you, sir?
Good job, guys. Thank you. Listen, grew up in Kensington, went to North Catholic, left in '73 to go in the Army, spent 30 years, met Frank Rizzo and Chick Fallon's many a times at G in Allegheny when I was a kid. He's a great man. Met his son. They were good people. There's no colors or diversions in Foxhole. Been all around the world, been in many battles, 3-4 times. We have to get it together. And things like this just divide us. That's all. All we can do is pray for everybody, and that's it. Good guy, and statues are important. the people, the figures, the things that happen for people that sacrifice. There's a lot of different ways to sacrifice, and Frank Rizzo made a lot of sacrifices.
Well done. Well said, Seamus. And thanks a bunch for holding on to weigh into the show. Will, who supports the statue being in place, joining us here on Saturday Night Live. Will, welcome in.
Yeah, as a longtime advocate for civil rights in the city of Philadelphia, I got to know Frank Rizzo up close and personal as a chief opponent in the Latino community. And what I found about Frank Rizzo is that he tempered his style as I tempered my style. And I had the fight with him over the July 4th coalition when he called for 100,000 troops. Cuba, with my ex-wife, took him up on how the police department can beat the Cubans, and the charter change. But one thing, I supported Frank Rizzo when he ran the second time against Wilson Good. And I did that because I saw a man who was really committed from the heart. And I think it's deplorable that we want to tear down these statues in Philadelphia of Frank Rizzo. Now, I don't have a problem with the statue in the South. But again, I believe that it's a little bit more difficult if you use the courts and you use to tear down statues here. It would be a lot easier here to have a conversation. And we should really have a conversation about who Frank Rizzo was. I was one of his chief opponents. But, at the end, I supported Frank Rizzo, and I was ready to support him when he died against Ed Rendell. And I supported him when he ran and lost by 10,000 votes. I was in that room with blacks and Latinos, and people actually cried when he lost by 10,000 votes.
Well,
so I just want to say that we need to have a conversation, an intelligent conversation about this, and we should stop vandalizing the statue downtown. It does no good but further divide our city.
Well, let me ask you a question. Certainly, it sounds like you were in politics. You want to give us a little background now, because we think we know who you are, and you.
Yeah, Wilfredo Rojas. I know Johnny.
Wilfredo, how are you? It's Lou.
Lou Agre, how are you?
How you doing, stranger?
Okay, I'm good. I'm good. And
by the way, so Lou had you picked right out. That's why I asked that question. And
me and Wilfredo have known each other for many, many years.
Well, listen, Wilfredo, we
share the same sentiment.
We want to thank you so much for calling in and sharing your experiences with us and your opinions.
Lou, quick, before we go to the break. Will, thanks very much. Frank, we'll get to you coming up after the break.
I just want to say something about what Wilfredo wrote about the statues in the South and the Confederate flag. That Confederate flag was never part of this country until the 1950s. It wasn't after the war. It was a complete reaction to the civil rights movement, and that's why it's wrong. It's not about heritage. It's about hate.
Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Coming up at 8 o'clock, 8 to 11, the Dan Loney Show will take you into the night. More conversation on the statue on Frank Rizzo. And again, special thanks to Frank Rizzo Jr. For joining us. Frank has been waiting a long time. We bring Frank into the conversation here on Saturday Night Live. Frank, welcome in, sir. How are you?
Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to say I was one of the guys in a crew that volunteered our time to set that statue many years ago, and we unveiled it for free, too, on New Year's Day during the Mummers Parade. And in that makeup of crew members, it was 161 and 542 members of the operating engineers and riggers. There were blacks and whites that volunteered their time to put that statue up. And when we unveiled it, there was as many probably blacks and whites applauding that statue back then. And I'm telling you, it was one cold night that we put that up, and it was one cold Mummers Day, and they still came out and they surrounded that statue. And it's really disheartening, because the people in the city of Philadelphia that work in the city, and there's a ton of minorities that work in the city, are living off the benefits of Frank Rizzo getting great contracts, union contracts for those workers in City Hall and everywhere else in the annex building that statue's in front of.
Frank, appreciate it. Well done. Well said. Go ahead, Lou.
I have to say, if you were operating a crane, I'm surprised
I can't hear him.
Hold on. Go ahead.
If you were operating a crane, I'm surprised the statue's still standing. This is actually Frank Bankert and I work together. He's one of my good friends and my boss.
Well, he's a rigger, and that means there was iron workers there. No, buddy. You mentioned 161, which means there are iron workers there. So really, you know, that statue should you never be able to be taken down if ironworkers put up.
We'll keep dialing on. Dan Loney standing by with more conversation. Lou, as we roll to the top, and boy, it's a quick show on a Saturday night here on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor, but thanks so much for coming in. When you listen to all the conversation and you translate that or transfer some of that thought process into your own thought process, which created your op-ed, can conversation occur, Lou? Is that possible? Can we get to the point where we no longer want to stand up for our own opinion, but we want to force change? You say what?
Well, look, I'm from old school politics. I believe that the purpose of politics is to talk the other side into your side. I do that as an organizer, and I do that when I try to knock on doors. But the fact is that what we have to do is focus on the important things: good jobs, good education, safe kids, safe neighborhoods for our children. And what the union movement does more than any other movement in the history of the world is moves people from being on the edges of society to the middle class. The best thing that I do and Frank does and other people do that gives us the most satisfaction is when we get somebody a job. It changes their life.
Well said. I can tell you this, the most difficult thing about this whole entire situation is that it's dividing people. It's bringing out the worst in people. And it's a painful situation, and I don't think we can make decisions like Lou said. You talk about the Confederate stuff. That's there's hate based in that. But in this situation, there has to be dialogue. This can't be a knee-jerk reaction. It's bringing out the worst in people.
It's jump back to the phones. We'll take one more caller, and then we'll turn the show over to Dan Loney. Malik joining us here on Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor. Malik, we're a little short on time, but I'll give you the floor. Welcome in, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to say to former Councilman Rizzo, Anthony Lamont, who is African-American and served on his detail, says hello. So, I'm coming from a friendly place, but here's the reality. Defacing a statue does not change the heart of the city, and neither does defacing a mural. And I believe that Joe Dock brought up the point that there has to be dialogue. And I think that's the bigger part that's being missed, not only just in this city, but across the country. You can remove a statue, but if you don't really talk about what the issues are and how people truly feel, I think the former councilman brought up great points about his father. But then there are a few in the city that have serious issue with things that occurred, and we can't get around, the stripping of individuals in the middle of the street. I mean, those are real issues that we have to address, and we see that playing out in culture as with the police and the community. And so as we talk about these things, we have to, I believe, respect each other's viewpoint and figure out how we move the ball forward. The past we cannot change. It's what we do now, how we talk about it now, and how we create pragmatic solutions that build a better future.
That's well said, and that's Malik Boyd. He's the host of Heart of the City, and I can say this, that you got to respect each other, and at the same time dialogue, and not let this bring the worst out in individuals. We can't allow it to define us or divide us.
Malik Boyd checking in here. Good stuff, Malik. Thanks very much. That's going to bring our show to a close. We have about 70 or 80 seconds. Lou, I want to give you the floor. You have 30 seconds to bring a close to the big show tonight. Thanks again for being in the studio.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for having me. I just want to reiterate about the enemies, the Nazis, the Klan, the alt-right, whether they come in a hood,
white supremacists, right?
White supremacists, whether they come in a hood, a swastika, or with a briefcase. Don't let them take our rights away.
That's Lou Agre joining us here in the studio.
Well,
Lou is the president of the Philadelphia Metal Trades Council, our special guest here in the studio. That's going to do it for Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, presented by Weinerman Pain and Wellness, serious doctors for serious injuries, and powered by Pond, Lahaki, Stern, and Giordano. It's Saturday Night Live with PhillyLabor on Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Stay tuned for the Dan Loney Show.
And I seen that open space. I hope you're saving that for medical marijuana because I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of that, and I just want to let you know we're talking big numbers. We're talking, as you know, they're talking trillions, but we're talking mucho billions around here of unionized pension money. I haven't heard in 6 weeks one conversation about Russia yet. That's the reality. They come to me about jobs. They come to me a little bit about Obamacare, but they don't come to me about Russia. And with Philadelphia jumping out of the seams as a hospitality town, we need our transportation to be clean, efficient, safe, and on time.
This program is a paid commercial announcement and in no way represents the views of WPHT or its management.